So let me start now. As I said, welcome everyone. Good evening, everyone. This new red-green dialogue of New Horizons Foundation, dialogues that are supported by the Green European Foundation, and we'd like to thank them for their support. We have very important people. I'd like to thank Lührmann, there are many consequences of the Ukraine war. One of the consequences is its impact in the European Union and the position of the European Union in the world. Something which has a very wide scope, very interesting to analyze and to determine how you perceive the position that the European Union is having in this conflict, in its relationships with the US, Russia, and the NATO. And secondly, we should now also forget that we have a member of the German government, because Lührmann is a vice minister or a minister of state. There's no equivalent in Catalonia or Spain. She's a vice minister for us to understand what she is. And obviously, she's the member of the German government. Maybe she can give us her vision from the position she has. And obviously, with Ernest Urtasun, he is an MP of the European Parliament from the Greens, and he can obviously tell us his perspective from the European Parliament. And just to finish, before I give the floor to Susanne Riga, the floor, please let me just say that please be open to adapt your interventions to considering what happened in the last few days. We hadn't had a new president in France, but we are going to be speaking about Ukraine war, but we have intertwined and interconnected elements. This event is going to be recorded via YouTube. You can also write your questions on the chat, and I will facilitate both speakers the questions. Susanne.
European Foundation. Welcome, Anna Lührmann. Mark has already said, Minister of State for Climate and Europe in Germany. It's a pleasure to have you here. And also Ernest Urtasun as the MEP from Catalonia, but also member of the Bureau of the Green Group in the European Parliament. So this dialogue is special for us, I think, and every day more important to talk about what is going to happen in Europe and how we can organize us, because it was planned as a red-green dialogue to talk about green issues and to talk about social issues. And I think we are with this at this one really up to highly preference on how we bring this together, the social and the environmental issues, and talking about a situation which makes us all involved in Europe about the war in Ukraine, and with all the consequences we will have to face, and we will have to debate on, and we will have to live with at this moment. So thank you, first of all, to be here, to have this time in the busy time both of you have with us, and to debate with us about it. And I would like to start this round with a question about, Mark said it already, yesterday we have had the election in France, and I think we are, a lot of us, we have breathed a little bit for the result we have had yesterday. So my first question would be, do you think with this election from yesterday in France, we are a step closer to an end, or to how to deal with this war, and how to get this war finished in a time which is where everybody is suffering, especially the Ukrainian people are suffering, but the fears all over Europe. So is this a step to an end, or what are coming out of this result of France, where we have to take much more care of now to really find an end and to make a step to finish this war? So I would like, Anna, you to start with this, and then maybe Ernest, and then I would like to pass over the moderation to Mark from News Horizons. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks. No, and thanks a lot. It's so great to be here and to hear some Catalan finally after all these years. I mean, I lived in Barcelona for a while, so I feel, although virtually I'm back a bit. Are we a step closer to peace? Well, at least this election didn't bring us a million steps away from peace, huh? Because I mean, let's face it, a candidate that is quite close to the Kremlin has never really, I mean, she tried to hide it now in the end, but she took money from Russian banks, was very proud to be photographed with Putin, clearly shares the nationalist ideology. So we are sort of fell short of her being a president by quite a margin, yes, but more than 40% of the French population voted for her. And I find it really shocking, because what I've seen so far in Europe, everywhere, in be it in Spain, be it in France, be it in Germany, there's a huge level of solidarity with Ukrainians. People have opened their home. They are supportive of policies that put draconic sanctions in place, that actually they could also say, no, we don't care, and such. So I was under the impression that, and also opinion polls say that the population in Europe largely supports Ukrainians against this Russian war of aggression. So to see that a candidate that is flirting with the Kremlin actually gets such a big vote share is a deep shock to me, and this actually brings me to this point that we have, particularly as politicians that support Ukraine, have to really make sure, because the struggle will go on for quite some time, that we win the support of the population for this, because it will be very tough times ahead for Europe. We already see now, due to the war, rising energy prices, rising food prices, economic insecurity, the sanction packages towards Russia are only sort of starting to show its effects now, but we will clearly, as our Minister for Economic Affairs has said, Green Party member Robert Habeck, we will become poorer in Europe because of this war, right? We need to spend much more money on not only on defense, but also on other aspects of foreign policy, of development cooperation and such, in order to hedge the Russian aggression. So if we really want to do this, then we need to find a way of doing this that the general public thinks that this is supportable. And we also need to make sure that the economic effects of this war now are not as often in crisis borne by the poor, by the weak in society, but rather that there's a share of this burden, a fair share, and that those that already now struggle to make ends meet in terms of energy, in terms of food prices, that they are supported from the government.
Thanks, Anna, for this first statement.
Gràcies, Anna, per aquesta primera declaració. Ernest, voldries dir alguna cosa en aquesta qüestió o vols que comencem com tu em diguis? Thank you so much for the organization of this seminar. I'd like to thank Anna Lührmann for being here with us. I'd like to remind you one thing. Currently, if we have two ministers in the German government that are excelling in the management of this crisis are the two Green ministers, Ellen Barber and Robert Haller. There's a recent poll about the degree of satisfaction of the German government, and Robert Habeck and Baerbock are the two preferred ministers of Germans who get the best ratings. So I'd like to congratulate Anna Lührmann for being part of this team, for the excellent work you're doing at a moment, at a difficult moment, particularly for Germany. This is a crisis that is very difficult for Europe, and particularly for Germany, because of their geopolitical and leadership role, and the role that has been inherited from the previous government. Therefore, so I'd like to thank you for being here. The result of the French elections, well, I agree with Anna. I reckon that what we can underscore is the fact that we have avoided the worst of possible scenarios. Someone has been funded and by the Kremlin, who in the campaign for the second round, she even said that she wanted to establish a strategic relationship with the government of Mr. Putin. That's what she said. Well, that would have been a real earthquake in all aspects if ultimately, well, France is the only nuclear power we have in the European Union after, the UK Brexit. Imagine that France, the only nuclear power in the European Union currently, is in the hands of someone who's in favor of Vladimir Putin. Well, that would have been crazy, and it would have had extraordinary dimensions. It would have weakened the European position, mainly for Ukrainians. Imagine Ukrainians in the first line of fire, having to face Putin, and Europeans choosing someone as Marine Le Pen as the president of the Republic. So we have avoided the worst possible scenario, and not so clear, and it's not so clear for me is whether or not the relations with Putin have been a halt to the growth of Marine Le Pen. I think that we should take a closer look at this. It's not so clear for me that the relations with Putin currently have a big cost for the extreme right, maybe in the case of Vox in Spain, with the political movements that surround the Kremlin pro supporters. Well, and Vox have been able to avoid this image of being associated with Vladimir Putin. But those who are supported Putin, Viktor Orban, Marine Le Pen, have not had to pay a price. And one of the most important moments of the second round. Well, Macron said that Marine Le Pen, was in close contact with the Kremlin. We'll talk about it, but this doesn't seem to be an efficient weapon to fight against as a extreme right. This is the first conclusion that I dare to expose here. Good enough. After this first introductory question, with a big content, Susanne, Anna, and Ernest, you can make your interventions generating this panoramic vision of the conflict with Ukraine, as we had expected. Anna, you have the floor. Thank you.
Not sure I got the translation, to be honest, but I'll just speak a bit about Ukraine. Okay. So
I think, and I think we are just to do a first introduction about the general situation in Ukraine at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hem de fer una primera introducció sobre la situació d'Ucraïna pel moment.
Okay. So yeah, no, I mean, yeah, the situation is heartbreaking. It's really since, I mean, from the moment this war started, and I was actually 2 months ago, I was in Warsaw for actually my normal first visit in my office, and then we received the news that the Russians violated the border and are moving towards Kiev, and then I immediately went to the border, and we already saw the first refugees coming. Now we have the worst humanitarian crisis we had since World War II in Europe, with by now I think it must be 4 million refugees leaving Ukraine, many more displaced within Ukraine, many people dying. I mean, you all see the pictures, large-scale atrocities being committed by the Russian invaders, and it's really, yeah, it's really, for me in particular. I mean, I'm born in '83, so it's really the first time a situation that I feel we're not safe in Europe. And that is really a dramatically new endeavor. I mean, we had some experiences with terrorism in last years, but that's nothing compared to having a neighbor that doesn't respect the borders of other countries, and that is obviously willing to use despicable violence to achieve its political ends. So for me, this really changed a lot. I mean, this is also where this German word Zeitenwende now came into place, coined by our chancellor in the days after the war. That we really sort of policies that we also as Green Party held very dearly, namely that we should not build up our military that much, right? That we actually in this new security situation had to change it. So we're supporting now really also the additional spending for military in Germany, which is something that I thought I would never do to this extent. But now we know it's necessary to defend not only our security, but also the one of our allies. I mean, you've already, Ernest hinted a little bit on it. We have this whole debate about delivery of weapons to Ukraine, where we, as Green Party representatives in the government, are clearly supporting this measure to help Ukraine defend itself. And we have already, as Germany delivered a lot of weapons, we will do more. And then, of course, there's the whole sanction package, and even here we already had 5 very severe sanction packages that show drastic effects on the Russian economy. We will have more sanctions. We're pushing also now for the next sanction package to include oil. And we should talk about nuclear actually, because now still a lot of the nuclear power plants in Europe receive their uranium from Russia actually. So this is again something we need to talk about. But we know that we're dealing with an aggressor, with Putin, who doesn't seem to care much about the economic prospects of his country. Otherwise, he wouldn't have started this war. And so it remains to be seen how much he will be impressed by these economic sanctions. Clearly, he has his sort of imperialist aims. He prioritizes them higher than other aims. Nevertheless, I think we really need to economically disentangle ourselves from Russia as fast as possible. Already from day one of this government, we, and particularly Robert Habeck as the Minister for Energy, has done everything we can to get rid of Russian dependencies as fast as possible. We've already steeply declined our gas that we consume from Russia. We have decided at EU level already to phase out of coal. We will hopefully very soon decide to phase out of oil, and all this. In order to be able to do all this, we mainly need to build up renewables much faster than we've ever done. That's why we've passed, as a cabinet, we've passed a package called the Easter package, where we will speed up the buildup of renewables really by a lot, as well as energy efficiency. That's something that often gets overlooked, but that also needs to happen, that we use the energy that we have in a much more efficient way. And of course, then we also need to diversify. yeah, so this is basically the where we stand. Very much commend the brave Ukrainians being there, fighting this huge neighbor with all they have, and we need to support them because for me it's clear that Putin cannot be allowed to win this war.
Val, doncs, bueno, gràcies per la...
Thank you for your question. Where are we standing right now? And I was explaining this very, very well. I believe that we are facing a systemic clash and crash in the safety and security of Europe. We had the Balkan War some years ago, but an aggression with the intention of modifying some borders in the European Union by a state invading another one. We had not known this since we had created the safety architecture in Europe in 1945. We've had many wars in the world, but in Europe, such a war was unheard of. And in one way or another, this is a systemic shock, because what Putin is reconsidering are the rules of the Charter of the United Nations. Putin's regime got out of the United Nations Charter because there's a surprising thing in the intervention made at any moment. There was an attempt to try to find the legitimation of the Council of Security, and he didn't even mention any articles of the Charter of the United Nations to justify the invasion. It's an imperialistic war. And I said, I also believe that there is a certain historical revisionism by Putin. He denies the legitimacy of the existence of Ukraine. This is the most shocking aspect. In some of the speeches before the invasion, he even accused Lenin of delivering or giving some or too many territories away and moving borders through an imperialistic or a military invasion is unacceptable, because one of the main principles of the international war built in 1945 is that borders cannot be changed via the military attack. What could happen in Africa, where all borders are misplaced due to the colonialistic approach that ruled at the time? It's a systemic shock, because Putin is trying to reconsider the order of security, including the framework of the United Nations. I'm speaking about the European safety architecture built in Helsinki. This is an introductory comment. Where are we standing right now? Well, Anna knows. Anna has a lot more information than I. But we've seen that before. Putin believed that this would be very fast. It would be a way to turn Ukraine into a puppet state because of the support that received from Europe with different weapons and guns. And we're at the second stage where Putin is regrouping troops to enter through the south with the intention of cutting access of Ukraine to the sea, reaching Odessa. This will lead us to a terrible military scenario. If the intention is to cut the access of Ukraine to the sea with a clear will of turning Ukraine into an unfeasible and impossible state, because they are exporters of agricultural products. And this for the Ukrainian economy would be terrible. But the question still is, when will peace arrive? When would it happen? Because we all want to stop deaths, war, attacks, destruction. Unfortunately, we are not there yet. Diplomacy can intervene when conditions are there, and I think that Putin is not willing to negotiate yet. And the proof is that well, the Austrian chancellor went to Moscow, Austria, as a neutral. Well, they said that Putin wasn't willing to negotiate. Can diplomacy intervene in this scenario? Well, they can. This is something that German government is working on. We have to continue on that line of action, and diplomatic channels have to be open to see whether there are some types of conversations that can happen. But peace and diplomacy will happen if we support the Ukrainians. For me, this is very important. A scenario which had no support to Ukrainians would have meant probably an automatic occupation of the country and the elimination of Ukraine. And then, diplomacy would have been totally irrelevant. There wouldn't have been any diplomatic perspective in such a scenario. But at the same time, we do not want a long war. But diplomacy negotiations have to happen with conditions where Ukrainians can negotiate, that they deserve our support. With us sending weapons and military support. And in the left-wing world in Europe, we see that there's a contraposition. Can we have either military support or diplomacy? Well, we have to have both. We have to keep diplomatic channels open, and we have to support the Ukrainians with the resistance against this absolutely intolerable invasion. We are in a scenario where we have to try to minimize through humanitarian diplomacy deaths, civilian and attacks. In the coming months, I'm afraid we'll continue seeing this type of aggression. Unfortunately, we still have a long way to see. Something we have to be totally aware of. Let me just leave it here for the moment. Okay.
Crec que ara sí que
I think that
l'Anna sí que
Anna
sent la
can
traducció.
hear the simultaneous interpretation. Yes, good. Thank
Perfecte.
you.
Val. Hi ha algunes preguntes dels
There are
assistents
some questions
que
that
l'Ernest i l'Anna
some
ja han
participants
contestat, que era una mica
both
un
Ernest
dilema
and Anna
que és normal que
answered.
tingui el nostre
It's a
aspect
normal
polític i que
dilemma
és
in
un
our
dilema
political
europeu,
scenario.
que
It's
és
a
què
European
fer
dilemma.
i
What do
quina
we
és la
have to
intervenció
do? What
necessària,
are
armes,
the
no
necessary
armes, quines armes, quina
interventions?
relació en el
Weapons, no
conflicte,
weapons? What kind of a relationship in the conflict should we
quins
have?
dilemes ens
And
provoca
what are the
i quines
dilemmas this
solucions
is
hi ha.
causing? What
Perquè hi ha
are
algunes
the
preguntes al
solutions we
respecte i
can
crec que
have?
les esteu contestant.
You're
Jo voldria fer-li
answering
una
some of these
pregunta a
questions, but I
l'Anna,
would like to ask Anna the following.
que és, hi ha un conflicte a Ucrània,
Well, there's a conflict in
la Unió
Ukraine.
Europea
The
ha hagut
European
de prendre
Union
unes
had to
decisions
to make
molt
some decisions
accelerades
very, very fast
respecte a la seva
with respect
posició en un
to their
conflicte armat
position
entre
in
Europa,
an armed
respecte a
conflict
Rússia,
in Europe,
respecte a Estats Units, la
with respect
OTAN.
to the US,
Creus
the NATO.
que s'ha
Would you
accelerat
say
un
that
reposicionament de la Unió
we have
Europea en les
accelerated the
seves
repositioning
relacions
in the European
exteriors?
Union with its foreign affairs, with its foreign relations with the rest of the world?
Well, if you would have asked me 3 months ago whether the EU is fit to respond to such a crisis in a fast, decisive and united way, I would have probably said no. But we actually managed now in the Council to pass the first sanction package. I think it was hardly 24 hours after the war started, because I mean, of course, also we had prepared for the situation. We have now already passed 5 very draconic and unprecedented packages of sanctions, and that despite the unanimity requirement that we have in the Council. So I actually I think the EU has shown that it is indeed willing and able to respond to such crisis. I mean, we've had also a lot of resolutions in the European Parliament. We've had a decisive action from the Commission. But of course, I think we also need to think now more clearly about how we can improve also the decision-making process in the common foreign and security policy, because right now it's very much sort of it's an intergovernmental realm. Mainly, we discuss sometimes a bit with Parliament, but I don't think Parliament has enough say in it. Also, when it comes to sanctions, to also then the military cooperation that will be strengthened within the EU now. So definitely we need some institutional reforms. That means including Parliament more, but it also means less unanimity, and also more sort of more collaboration in the realm of defense and foreign policy. For me, that's a clear response to this crisis.
Gracias, Ana. Ernest,
Thank you, Anna. Ernest, I'm going to ask you a question, but you can add other things. But there's a certain connection. The traditional position of the European Union with respect to the NATO has a new dimension. There's been a change. European Union, is it possible to think of an autonomous European Union action considering NATO? Is this a fair question that we can ask in Europe? I believe that one thing that we should have clearly in our minds is that sometimes Putin and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, in some areas were considered the geniuses of geopolitics. I think that this crisis proves that this is not so, because actually the geopolitical consequences for Russia are being a total disaster, a total wreck. With this intervention, making the European Union react so quickly, and Finland and Sweden are about to enter all the NATO. Well, this is something that pacifists don't really like, but this is a symptom that is going against Putin's plans. I don't know if this was something, it was calculated. It's not turning the way it was expected 2 years ago. Emmanuel Macron said the European Union is mentally dead. It was an outdated situation, and Sweden and Finland are about to enter the NATO as the result of this intervention that I don't know if Putin had considered. In any case, in the European Union, well, they should have an autonomous position from NATO. It did have it in the past. The most dynamic decisions with respect to Ukraine were made not by the NATO. They were made by European Union. The European Union offered a mechanism to support the peace facility. And even before the war, the European Union was the big engine to try to resolve the conflict in Ukraine, because the Minsk process, that Anna knows better than I do, because in Germany played a key role in this process. It was a European process led by France and Germany, where they tried to reach a solution in the Donbass war, because the military scaling would not continue. So the European Union had a separated policy from NATO, and I think that it should be so in the future. It's difficult right now to speak about all this when Putin, resuscitated NATO with this military intervention, but this should be a goal in our minds, and this is closely connected to the fact that the European Union needs to have an autonomous defense policy. Being able to make decisions that oftentimes will coincide with the US and other times not. We have to have our own voice, aside from the NATO, aside from the US. That's my opinion. But there are many things to be done in Europe of safety and defense is and something that is rising. There's a document that is called the Strategic Compass, and how to activate the defense policies in Europe. But this is a way to amongst many. We have to be aware of the fact that the Ukraine crisis gave a very important role to NATO and to the European Union mainly. We have to try to to defend Europe, as autonomously from NATO as possible.
Gracias, Ernest.
Thank you, Ernest. Well, I have many questions here. I'm going to change perspective. We all know that one of the well, first of all, we have the humanitarian crisis and the drama that wars represent. But the Ukraine war has many other consequences, and one of them is, generating a crisis in the energy model. Not because it was unknown, but this energy model was in a crisis. It's not due to the Greens, warnings that were issued in the past, but the war has generated an acceleration in the decision-making process. I would like to ask Anna, knowing that in the European Union we can share certain principles of the energy transition, that is, or that are not going to affect us equally. The Russian gas reaches Germany more than Spain. So what would you say? Well, there was a need, but what would you say that is more important than in the past in energy terms and energy policies? What do we have to do after this war, which is a chantage from Russia to the rest of Europe, because this is going to be affecting citizens, and in Germany this is affecting you very directly, and I'm sure this generates tensions when managing this conflict. So what would you say this is what would you say the situation is right now?
Well, yeah, it clearly shows now that the energy policies of the past were a disaster. No, they put us into the dependency of Russia, of other authoritarian regimes. I mean, we should not forget that actually historically Germany started to build up the imports from Russia as a response to the oil crisis that was there some decades ago, because one wanted to become more independent from the Gulf countries. So I mean, that was at least the initial start, and I think it really needs to be also a subject for future discussion, how actually this dependency on Russia could increase as much as it has during the last years. So clearly, what we need to do now is to get rid of fossil and other imports from Russia as fast as possible. We're really doing everything we can. That also, I mean, that includes, as I said before, first and foremost, the buildup of renewable energies, of energy efficiency. We're really doing a lot there in terms of investment, in terms of speeding up processes and everything. But it also means to diversify imports, and that really hurts me again as a Green Party politician from time to time, because it also means that now for an interim period we need to substitute, for example, gas imports from Russia with LNG gas from the US, with natural gas coming also from Qatar and other places. We probably even need to talk about exploiting new gas fields and all that stuff that we actually don't want for nature protection and other reasons. So it really brought us into a very peculiar position, and particularly because because really so much of our wealth is really, I sometimes feel it's really built on quicksand, our wealth here in the European Union, because it depends so much on these fossil imports from all around the world. So we clearly need to become more independent, build up renewable energies. But even when we build up renewable energies, we also need to make sure that we don't get all our solar panels from China, because China as well is another autocracy that we don't want, that we want to do trade with, yes, but not to an extent that we become dependent. There should always be that we really learned that the hard way now. We should always diversify our trade partners. So we also really need to do more. And here, really, the French presidency now of the EU was very instrumental, that we really build up our European sovereignty, in the sense that we manage not only to defend ourselves, but also have critical industries on European soil.
Molt bé, gràcies. Ernest, abans ho has... Canvio una altra vegada.
Okay, thank you very much, Ernest. You mentioned that when you talked about the French elections and the position of Le Pen with Putin, Le Pen is not the only one that had connections with Putin, as some right-wing parties had with Trump. You know, some of them had connections with Trump. Would you say that after the conflict, I know that we are speculating, but would you say that in spite of it all, the interests we have under a certain vision of Europe and the world will be maintained? Because Le Pen had elections, and right now we are in the middle of a conflict, and defending Putin is probably not the easiest for a simple matter of public relations. But there was a connection. There were connections that were solid. It was not just a picture, it was a way of understanding the world. Would you say that this will be still there as a latent element? This bad geostrategy of Putin will eliminate those connections that we or that they had before? Let me put it this way. Allow me to say something with respect to the previous question that you asked. And one of the big conclusions of this crisis is that we need to accelerate the energy transition. Definitely, our dependency from fossil fuels, so far we thought that was just a struggle against climate change, but we realized that it's also it's connected to peace and security. And if we want a Europe with the capacity of defending democracy and human rights, we cannot depend, as Anna said, on the chantage that the autocrat that we have this or next month will generate. So right now, I think that one of the big debates we have in the European Union is to see how we can accelerate the energy transition. This is very important here. Because we need to accelerate it. In Catalonia, particularly, as you know, we have not built a wind farm for many years. This is a big lesson for our government, for the government of Catalonia. We are entering in Europe an important stage to deploy renewable energies to reduce inflation, which is closely connected to fossil fuels. And we have to accelerate the renewable energies. Spain has many homeworks to do, but the government of Catalonia also does. This will determine what will happen in Catalonia in the coming years. And now let me answer your question. As I said before, I believe that we have gone beyond the stage of a certain, how to put it, fear. Before all parties, but we're proud of their relationships with Putin. Marie Le Pen printed a leaflet with her picture next to Putin. Right now, there's been some steps back when showing off relations with Putin. Some weird things happen. Viktor Orban for some time. I don't know if he still does that, but he said no to having not to having the support weapons for Ukraine go through my country. Well, we had the relations with Putin in the past, but it's a political matter here. I think that, well, people like Viktor Orban or Marine Le Pen still admire some of the things that Putin has done and is doing, and they still are still their strategic allies in Europe, because it's difficult now to support Putin's government. And one of the consequences of the Ukraine government is that all the work done by Putin when penetrating democratic societies in Europe through support and funding of different parties, etc. Now it's more difficult because everyone is very alert with respect to what's happening in Ukraine. But let me go back to what I said before. What we had to now think about now is that Putin's invasion in Ukraine will generate a political cost, and not for Urban, because he swept everything away, and Marine Le Pen paid no price because or a little price, because the brutal aggression of Putin against Ukraine and determining that these parties have been their supporters in Europe for many years will be a strong weapon to fight against the far wing, for right wing. Well, in France, for example, and in other countries, you know, the extreme right wing has, you know, had some elements of support in society. That's something that we need to analyze. And another question for you, please allow me to ask you,
com a membre del govern alemany,
give
com a
us
Alemanya.
your vision as a German member of the government, as a German citizen.
Esteu, crec,
I
no soc un
believe,
expert en política
well, I'm no
alemanya, però tinc la
expert in German
sensació
policy
que heu
or
hagut
German
de
politics,
prendre
but you've had to
mesures
learn how to take
noves
new measures
des del punt de vista alemany, de la
from
seva
a German
relació
perspective of your
amb la
relationship
despesa militar,
with
de les seves relacions
German
exteriors,
expenditure,
etc.
your foreign
Un govern
relations, a government
que havia d'arribar per fer una altra cosa i que tots
that
estàvem
was
celebrant la seva
here to do
victòria
something else, that we all celebrated your
perquè es
victory
dediqués
because
a
you were going
fer l'inici del post-Covid
to start the post-COVID
i ens hem trobat amb la
era.
guerra. Jo voldria
We found
que ens expliquessis
with a war in
quines
front
són
of
les teves
our
percepcions,
faces.
no? Com a
What are
membre
your
del govern,
perceptions as a member
de
of
la
the
gestió que
government
vosaltres us esteu
of
trobant
what
ara
you are now
des d'un punt de
facing
vista, si em permets, alemany.
from a
Ja
German
no només
perspective,
europeu, sinó també
not just European, but
alemany.
a German perspective? Thank you.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we only came into government in December, and we had and still have a very ambitious coalition agreement to prioritize fighting the climate crisis, to prioritize digitalization, to prioritize social cohesion within Germany. So really a lot of very ambitious project already, and now on top of that, of course, now a lot of our attention is taken by this war and by addressing it. However, I think it makes a difference that we as Green Party are now here in the government, also when it comes to the question not only how to address this war and how to become energy independent from Russia, for example, but also when it comes to the point that we should really fight every crisis, right? That we shouldn't forget about global hunger, that we shouldn't forget about the climate crisis that is really unfolding already. I mean, you can already see the consequences, the disasters increasing. You see, I mean, Eastern Africa, for example, has had a drought now, I think, for the fourth year, subsequent year. So we really need to get our act together in fighting the climate emergency, and so we're really doing all we can to also make sure that we address this. We've moved international climate policies to the Foreign Office, so that's why I'm State Minister for Europe and Climate. Yeah, so that's what we're working on. But of course, we need to show full solidarity to the people of Ukraine that are suffering from this war of aggression now.
Thank you, Anna. We were supposed to finish at 7, so I'll be closing with some final comments. I'd like to thank you, Anna, for your presence. I know that well, you've had to change your agenda. I'm sure that today's contents is quite dense, but I would like to ask a final question to Ernest, and then we'll finish. What are the next steps, the next initiatives in the European Parliament with respect to the Ukraine conflict? What are your feelings? What is your perception about the possible feasibility of the acceptance of Ukraine in the European Union? They requested it, they were accepted. So what's going to happen, would you say? Well, the European Parliament now, as all governments, are very busy because we're following the Ukraine crisis and the economic consequences it will have in Europe. And we are hearing how we can help investment to accelerate the eco-investments. That will be one of the big topics of debate next year. well, this will require more investments. Which are the resources, which is one of the question marks that we have on our tables, and the possible acceptance of Ukraine in the European Union. We have to be aware of the fact that when Volodymyr Zelensky asked for this, European Parliament wanted to offer a political message, because that's up to the European Union, considering the dramatic situation that Ukraine is living. We have to support them. And Ukraine, this means that Ukraine will be part of the European process tomorrow. Well, it's a long process. It's not so quickly done. There are some the criteria, the Copenhagen criteria. We need an economy on a welfare state. These are long processes. It's hard for me to imagine the acceptance of Ukraine tomorrow. That will be something that will take longer. Here we are. We're seeing Eric Cocoletta said or wrote an article to consider a special status for Georgia and Ukraine. The perspective in Europe for Ukraine is there, but this is not something that will happen overnight. Well, fair enough. Thank you so much. I'd like to say that, well, this is the first red-green dialogue. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Ernest. You can retrieve this event in YouTube, and we can meet in the next dialogue, and hope to see you very, very soon. Thank you so much for your participation, and goodbye.